Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Zhenya, and in today's video, I'm just going to be talking about all the books that I read in February. So I have 4 of them here with me right now, but I did read 7 this month. I'm not going to do too much of an intro, I'm just going to get right into the books that I read. I will be going through these books in the order that I read them, just so you know. First off, we started with Onyx Storm. This is by Rebecca Yarros, and it is the 3rd book in the Empyrean series. You may know it as the Fourth Wing series. That's the book that really blew up and got everyone talking about it maybe a year or 2 ago. If you're unaware, this series follows Violet Sorrengail, and she is at Basgiath War College, which is a fictional military school. The people at the school, who are known as riders, get to bond with dragons, and then they get a special signet power, and of course they get to fight in the war. There's obviously a lot more that goes on, but that's just a very brief description of like the most important part of the plot that you need to know. Because this is the 3rd book in the series, I can't really talk too much about it because I feel like if I say anything about this book, it would spoil the first 2. Also, I wanted to say that this is a romantasy series, so I know that the description I just said sounds kind of fantasy, but if you are thinking about reading it, just know that it has a very heavy plot of romance. So I'm not usually a fantasy reader, and I can't really call myself a critic for that reason, but I will say that in this book in particular, the fantastical plot points of it, I don't know if that's a word, they just felt very messy and dense and all over the place. Honestly, the book felt a little bit confusing at times. However, I am reading these books for a fun time and not necessarily as an amazing fantasy series. Sometimes I really just need a change of pace from my usual reads, and this series has really delivered that for me. Because of that, I was able to put aside the fact that the plot felt a little bit messy and really just enjoy my time reading it, but I feel like it's important that I say that because I think a lot of readers would not be able to do that, especially readers who are really into fantasy and read that genre a lot. The first half of this book was definitely driven by the plot of the romance between Violet and Xaden, who's the male main character. I thought that the romance between them was really well done, and there was a lot of growth from the last book to this book. It went from feeling pretty immature in Iron Flame to feeling more mature, and I think that Xaden is honestly a great male main character. The first half of the book, like I said, it did really go deep into the romance, but the second half is when the plot really started to pick up and feel a little bit less confusing, and I really started to enjoy it more in the second half. And I would say probably by the 20% mark, I was really on the edge of my seat for the entire rest of the book, and I was just flying through it, and I read it all in one sitting. So I did really enjoy that. To me, it seems like Rebecca's writing is improving in each book. I definitely saw a big change between Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, and then especially in this book, the writing does feel more mature and a little less cringy at times, but I think it's still very obvious that Rebecca Yarros has a long way to go, and I think she could really work on either her personal editing or maybe get an editor, try and work on the pacing of the story and the organization, because it just doesn't really seem to make sense compared to other books that I've read. I'll just finish off by saying that I go into this series just wanting a good time and kind of a bit of an escape, but not really an escape at the same time because it's still political and there's a lot of lore in these books. But I'm not really expecting a piece of literary prestige when I read these books. I'm just looking for a good time. So Onyx Storm, I ended up giving it 3 stars. The next book that I read is Lovely War, and this is by Julie Berry. This is a historical romance that's intertwined with Greek mythology. Aphrodite tells the story of 2 different couples during World War I. I absolutely loved the concept of this book. I went in knowing the concept, and I did have very high expectations, and I'm very happy to say that I was not disappointed. I honestly felt like the concept was executed very well. One of my favorite parts of the story was how authentic all of the characters felt, even the Greek gods and goddesses, honestly. It was really easy to love and feel connected to the characters, which of course leads to a bit more emotion when reading the book. The writing is really filled with very beautiful reflections on love. I do think that this would be a really good book to flip through when you're looking for good quotes about love that are very powerful. I really wish that I owned the book, but this is one that I got from the library. I waited for so long, I think months, in the hold list, but I was very excited to get it, and I overall had a really great time with this book. I ended up giving it 4.25 stars. The next book that I read this month is Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. This book follows Scarlett, and she's a student athlete diver at Stanford. Her big struggle of the book is that she's going through a mental block because of a past diving injury that she had. The male main character of this book is Lucas, and he is also a student athlete at Stanford, but he is a swimmer. They end up starting a little bit of a fling after they find out that they have a common interest in the bedroom, if you know what I mean. However, a big conflict of the book is that Lucas's ex-girlfriend, Penelope, is like Scarlett's best friend on the diving team. I won't say anymore because I don't want to spoil the book too much, but it's a romance. You kind of can see where the book is going to go, and it's Allie Hazelwood, so if you know the setup of her books, you could probably predict a little bit of how this story would be, but it was a very fun time. So I got into Allie Hazelwood because I really love her STEM romances. I am a STEM major, or I was a STEM major. I guess I graduated. I don't know how you would say that. Even though this is a college sports romance and a genre of romance that I don't typically read, I still really wanted to support Allie Hazelwood, and I was really pleasantly surprised to see that she still incorporated STEM into the book. However, I really enjoyed learning more about college swimming and diving. It's something I didn't really know a ton about, and I enjoyed that aspect of the book. I think that Allie Hazelwood's writing is honestly improving. I have always liked it, and I know that a lot of people find it cringy, but I did feel that the writing in this book was a little bit more mature and had less cringy lines. It still had that, like, STEM romance vibe from Book Talk, if you are aware of that, but it was just a little bit different, and I liked that in this book. I did read some other reviews online, and it feels like a lot of people really hated Penelope, who's the ex-girlfriend of Lucas, but I actually really liked her being in the story. It made it feel a little bit more realistic and just added a different element that you don't typically see in romances. However, I can see why a lot of people really didn't like her character. She was in there a lot. I think it may have been overdone a little bit, but I personally didn't mind. And then also I wanted to say that this book, you can kind of tell by the cover, it was advertised as being a very spicy read. And I think that compared to Allie Hazelwood's other books, it is a little more intense than those ones. I know that it can be kind of annoying when a book is not what it's advertised to be, and everyone has their own personal opinion on these kind of things, but I actually don't love reading spice that much, so I was kind of glad to see that it wasn't as heavy as the book was advertised to be, but I can understand where people's disappointment may be coming from. I just think that it said the perfect amount personally, and if a reader really wants to go further with their imagination, they can. She just left enough unsaid to work really well, in my opinion. That's honestly all I have to say about Deep End. I was pleasantly surprised, and I'm really glad that I'm starting to like Allie's books again. The last two that I read by her were kind of misses. However, now that I say that, I don't even think I'm going to read her next book. It's like more of that monster romance thing. Not really something I'm into. But anyways, I gave this book 4 stars. The next book that I read in February was Of Time and Turtles, Mending the World Shell by Shattered Shell. This is by Cy Montgomery, and it is illustrated by Matt Patterson, and he has some really wonderful illustrations in here. This is a nonfiction book, and it tells the story of injured turtles who are being rehabilitated at a turtle rescue center. It's called Turtle Rescue League. It also tells about the author's experience volunteering at this Turtle Rescue League throughout a long period of time, and it happens to take place in the midst of the pandemic. I will say that I was a little bit disappointed with this book. I went in with some pretty high expectations because I love turtles, and I was feeling pretty hooked in the beginning of the book, but as it went on, it just felt very repetitive and boring. And honestly, I just really didn't want to relive the entire pandemic through this author's point of view. She ended up making it into something that was, I don't know, it just didn't feel like it was focused on the turtles as much as it should have been. I also felt like we were just hearing every minor detail about the author's personal times at the Turtle Rescue League, which, I don't know, I just didn't really pick up the book for that reason. So I think that my disappointment really boils down to the fact that I had different expectations than what the book was possibly trying to achieve. I don't know, I read the back of the book before I went in, so I don't know what went wrong. For me personally, I feel like I would have rather taken this media in like a documentary film sort of style instead of reading a book about this certain topic. I don't know if that makes sense. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I mean. I don't know. I really love turtles and tortoises so much. I have a wonderful, wonderful tortoise. His name is Rudolph Nureyev, and I'll insert a picture. I was just hoping to learn more about these fascinating creatures, and I didn't learn enough about the turtles to feel happy with this book. I also thought that the book is trying to like make a connection between the slow lives of turtles and then our lives and like the timeline of that, and I don't know, I just felt like that didn't really work. So overall, I didn't really love this book, but you may like it. I'm not going to discourage you from reading it. I don't rate my nonfiction books, so I don't have a rating for this, but it is on the lower end of nonfiction books that I've read. The next book that I read was Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. This is the 6th book in the Harry Potter series, and this one really delves deep into the lore of Voldemort, who's the main antagonist in the series, as well as goes into the relationships between other characters, very heavily so on Dumbledore and Harry Potter. This is a series reread for me, and I know that a lot of people talk about Harry Potter online, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. But I did want to say that I read this book series a lot when I was younger, but I actually read books 1 through 4 the most, so I was very pleasantly surprised that I didn't remember everything from this book, so I had a lot of factors of surprise when reading it, which I really appreciated. I honestly had a great time with this book, and I felt like this book is crucial in the storyline of the overall series, and it made me very excited to read The Deathly Hallows, especially because I feel like I only read that twice when I was younger, and I don't remember any of the details. So that's Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. I gave it 4.5 stars. The next book that I read in February is Isaac's Song. This is by Daniel Black. It's set in current time in 80s Chicago, and despite past repression, Isaac is doing well in life. He's really embracing his identity and feeling strong in himself. However, after Isaac's father passes away, he ends up going to therapy because the death of his father impacted him a lot more than he thought it would, because they had kind of a rocky relationship. The book is really a journey of self-discovery, family history, and just struggling with the past. I really liked the exploration of grief in this book and exploring the past relationships that Isaac had with his mother and father, but most specifically his father. I also really liked the coming of age aspect of this book, because even though it's told in the current point of view of Isaac when he's an older adult, you get to hear about Isaac's past and him growing up, which I always enjoy hearing about. It was very tough to see all the inner turmoil that Isaac is going through, but I think that the author did a really good job of getting you to feel a lot of emotion for Isaac, but not making it too depressing. I think that this book has the potential to help a lot of people. Personally, I found a lot of value in hearing about the experience of not only growing up Black in America, but growing up as a mostly closeted person in the LGBTQIA community. I did really like this book, but some of the reasons it didn't quite hit a 4 stars for me are I felt a little bit thrown out of the story multiple times, specifically when Isaac goes into his past stories that he wrote, his poems and like novels. It just didn't really work with the flow of the story for me. I definitely get what the author was going for, and I can see the symbolism by including these stories that Isaac wrote in his past childhood, but it really just pulled me out, and I didn't love that part. I also didn't really like the scenes with the therapist. I didn't like how the therapist approached Isaac and how she talked to him. That's just a personal issue, though. I can't really speak on how therapy is for everyone, but I just didn't really like that part of it. And then finally, I just didn't really feel very impacted by the writing style. To me, it just fell a little bit flat and it left me wanting just a bit more. It was still a really great story though, and I would definitely read more by Daniel Black. I give this book 3.75 stars. The final book that I read is Freedom is a Constant Struggle. This is by Angela Davis. This book explores connections between past and present liberation movements, specifically emphasizing Black feminism, intersectionality, and prison abolition in a time of state violence and oppression. The layout of this book is split up between individual essays and speeches and interviews, so it's not necessarily a novel or a standard nonfiction. It's different essays, interviews, and speeches. I would definitely recommend reading this book slowly over time. The issues that are presented in this book are pretty heavy topics, and I think that they really deserve time to be sat with, digested, and really thought over instead of flying through the book. I think that if they're read back to back, it can seem very repetitive, which to some people that may take away the importance of the topics. That being said, I wish that I personally didn't read it as quick as I did. I would have loved to sit with it longer. However, I did have the constraint of it being a library book and I needed to turn it in, but I can see myself buying this book in the future and rereading it slowly over time. I think that it would have an even bigger impact than it already did on me. My biggest takeaway from this book is Angela Davis's opinion on drawing away from individualism and really coming together as a joint movement. In other words, Angela Davis is trying to point out the dangers of bogging down individuals with this heavy weight of justice for just themselves when you can really come together and work harder as a collective movement. With this book, I really enjoyed pushing my thinking further than it usually goes. Not just this book, actually, just a lot of the nonfiction that I've been reading in general. I just feel like for me, it's making a very big impact on my life and I'm getting a lot of value out of it. So if you have been thinking about picking up some nonfiction books and you are usually reading fiction, I would highly recommend trying to step out of your comfort zone. With that being said, those are the 7 books that I read and finished in February. I hope that you enjoyed hearing my thoughts. And if you have read any of them or you wanted to say anything about my opinions, feel free to leave a comment down below and feel free to comment anything. I really love to hear from you guys, and I appreciate everyone who has watched to the end. Okay, until next time, bye!